City of Stevens Point, as Allison said, right in the middle of the state, and we have the Wisconsin River that does run through our city. So another reason for us being more conscious of what our salt use is, being MS4 city and having one of the major rivers in the state that runs through us. We want to make sure we're doing our part in reducing our salt use. So, and before we really get into it, a couple things that I wanted to bring up from our perspective. Anytime we're getting into newer technologies and talking about reducing salt while still delivering safe roads for our residents, it's a continuing process, and we don't claim to be right that we're the best, but along the way we're trying to be better. And ultimately, the city participating in these types of presentations and webinars is, I found a lot of times when we do that, we're hearing or we're getting questions or people explaining how maybe they do it. And together through the process, the goal is that we try to get better. So a little bit of our operations background for kind of to give perspective on the size of our city. Really a small to medium sized city here in Point. We maintain approximately 325 lane miles of road total, and that could be anything from our residential streets to more of our collector type roads. On our salt routes, our designated salt routes, we define those about 71 lane miles of salt routes or roads that we would actually put salt, not just a salt sand mixture down. And then, of course, our brine routes is another practice that we started doing that really helps us out in the pre-wetting, the anti-icing aspect of it. For a little more perspective, I know this would probably be pretty hard to see or understand, but these purple lines here, that just defines our brine route, and these are really our main thoroughfares of the city. The ones that pre-storm, if they get slippery, we're going to have the highest volume of traffic that would be having issues. Really, the police departments, fire departments' concerns are keeping these roads as safe as possible through the duration of any storm. So that's why we added them to our brine routes. Just kind of makes sense, our main roads. And then salt routes, again, we define these roads that during a storm we would actually apply salt down. We do pre-wet our salt, which helps. Along with these, you notice a couple pockets on the map. It's not quite true, but in general, wherever a residence would be or business would be, if they're on one of the side streets, they'd never be more than 3 blocks away to a salt route. So maybe their house or their property isn't on a road that we try to keep bare, but within 3 blocks they'd be getting to a road that is, and can get them again to our collectors and ultimately to where they're trying to travel to safely. So our story with calibrating, the city started calibrating back in 2014, and it was after attending the APWA, for those that don't know, American Public Works Association snowplow rodeo. And during that, we took a lot of drivers that year. I wasn't with the city then, but people before me did a good job having the foresight to start putting these things together. And we got introduced to the field handbook, the APWA Snow and Ice Control Field Handbook, the little cover that's on the screen here. And our drivers really did start kind of going through it to see, what's in there and what we're doing and how it compares. So after that rodeo, that's when we first started calibrating. And not a whole lot had changed, but we started calibrating, and we had our eyes set on getting a brine maker and adding brine routes, but we just quite weren't there yet. And then as we grew and the years went on, we phased in new trucks. So our spreaders are mostly controlled by ground speed and road temperature. So that helps with some of the automatic calibrations. And again, using the guide that's within the APWA Snow and Ice Control Handbook, getting us close to what their recommendations are for, proper salt use. So we're not over salting, but we're still getting enough material down on the road to keep our roads safe. And throughout the process, drivers were pulled on different routes. Like, hey, what do you guys think is the right amount of salt to be putting down on your route to keep it safe? And at that time, the answers were really all over the place. Um, Pre-calibration, drivers were ranging anywhere from 400 and 441 pounds to 1,584 pounds per mile. So there a large difference there, and I think I'm trying to remember exactly what temperature that set up the APWA guidelines, but really in that recommendations with a pre-wet system, we should be somewhere closer to that 80 pounds to 320 pounds. So we were using a lot of salt prior to going through this process, and very expensive. So, we through the process we found savings and definitely the impacts to the environment. Um, Here's just a picture of our basic setup. We do have a couple trucks that are slightly different, but as I mentioned, we're running a pre-wet system with our V-box spreaders, and we do that with our sand routes as well. So even our sand, when we put it down, we still do the pre-wet with the brine. These are about 450-gallon brine tanks. With I'm trying to remember the yardage of material offhand, but pretty basic, or not basic. It's a good setup with the drop spreader in there. We're able to again, we have the ground speed control that'll control the spread and the amount of material going down, as well as calculating to what the road temps are for kind of the proper sweet spot of putting salt down. We're using the Force America products. We've had good luck with them. I know there's a lot of other products out there, but that's what we're using. One thing that's really nice is we're able to calibrate, if we want to do a quick calibration check, instead of getting the scale out, it's mid-season or even mid-storm, and one of our trucks seems like it's not putting out enough salt or too much salt. We have the ability to take one of our trucks that we believe is running right, download the settings and like a USB stick and stick it into our other trucks and have it mimic that. Now, of course, mechanical differences, it's not always going to be the same. So we still have to do our hard calibration checks, but that's a nice feature for when it's, mid-storm or, storm's coming and we don't really have time to do a true calibration check with the checking the weight that's coming out that the spreader says it's coming out and making adjustments. In the truck, we created these kind of cheat sheets. Again, the drivers can control the spinner speed, but they don't get to control the settings. That's automatically based off of road temps, and again, the driving speed. But if they're in an area and they need to, open it up, have the spinner spin a little faster, so maybe you're getting less material over a larger area, or if they're just doing a single lane and it's more of a main road, they'll probably dial it down a little bit to get a more concentrated amount of material down. Not a perfect science, but our drivers have gotten pretty good at kind of paying attention to what their spinner speed is, as well as we still do allow, we don't know if we'd be battling some kind of big ice storm. We do allow drivers to use a blast feature if needed, but it's pretty rare, and maybe some intersections will get an extra blast here and there. And really the focus is out on our main thoroughfares, that just keeping things safe and keeping PD, let them catch their breath a little bit in a storm, so we're preventing accidents. I think this is a chart we put together for a presentation we did last year, and it highlights the different years and what our salt usage was. and kind of correlates with, you know, pre-calibration. This is where we were at, and our average salt usage for a year was about 4,500 tons, and some change. Then we started with the calibration. In the time period, there were some new trucks trickling in, but we weren't at a full ground speed control setup. Just we were really just focused on our calibrating, and that brought our average down to about that 3,300 tons per year. And I got all the stuff at the bottom of my screen from the Zoom call, so you can't see exactly. Um, this next table, what I did is I took the table that we created from our different phases of calibrating or salt usage decline. And one thing that we've heard a lot of, well, we haven't got as much snow as that we used to get. So honestly, I believed that until we looked into it. So, and it's not a perfect correlation. Some of the year there's a little bit of overlapping. One's by total year and one was done by season, but it should be pretty close. And the average snowfall is actually in the periods where we were using less salt, our average snowfall totals were actually up. So I think that really shows the importance of calibrating your equipment and being mindful of what your salt usage is that we technically received more snow in a period where on average we used significantly less salt. Like we're talking, we went from an average of 4,500 tons a year to about 1,600 tons a year. If we would include this year, that'd probably bring our average down, but our snowfall total was also significantly down until we got to March, and that messed everything up. But um, some of the budget impacts that we had, 'cause that's always a question that we get, is um, throughout that time period when we noticed how much less salt we were using, we actually reduced our annual salt budget by 100,000 a year. There are times maybe we'll have to increase it if it was a heavy year, but we're buying less salt per year, and so that was on average the 100,000 that we got to put into some of our other operating costs. And as everyone's well aware, operating costs for public works departments, so just about everything has gone up significantly the last couple of years. So that extra operating funds really allows us to, um, I guess, keep up to some aspect. It'd still be nice to have more, but we're doing what we can with what we have, and that's a very helpful component. Um, Another, salt use declined, as we pointed out, approximately 2,000 tons a year. And this is a quote from the Wisconsin Salt Wise, and I think it's one that's when we have the conversation about reducing salt, I found when I talk to residents about it, I usually get two types of residents, and not a lot in the middle yet. Usually get, well, it used to be nice because we had bare roads, and this we want bare roads and makes the roads look nice. It's easier to drive in winter, and then we got the people. Especially here in Stevens Point, where there are a lot of environmentally conscious residents that, well, I wish we wouldn't use any salt or do anything. So we got kind of these extremes. But one thing we like to point out on people that miss the old days of a lot more salt is the real cost of road salt adds up to about 10 times the initial cost of road salt and labor applied to it, with how it's affecting our infrastructure and our bridges and our cars. And it's another point that we get into with residents often is about the impacts of brine. We do use brine. We do get complaints about it. We do like to point out that it is just salt and water, at least the brine that we're using. So if we were using more salt and we were creating more of this slush solution, the concentration is going to be higher. So it's it's how we try to navigate some of those questions. And there's also on our part, just because there's snow coming or a storm predicted, doesn't mean that we need to be out there brining. So it's us trying to rein in what the most appropriate use of the brine would be. So when we do get those questions about how it's affecting their car, and it's more visible on a car because you're going to see the white stuff stick and you don't have constant, splash from slush, kind of washing it off or making it look less impactful. Um, Environmental impacts, again, credit to Wisconsin Saltwise and Allison for really keeping these figures together, especially where we live right on the river here. Reduced runoff to the Wisconsin River. So we're reducing our salt impacts to the river, which, goes downstream. Um, can definitely harm the aquatic life, including fish. Allison. I don't know if it's on the website, Saltwise website anymore, but Allison would. She came in last year and we talked to school children about the effects of salt, and she had pictures of two fish. One that was in a living in an environment that was impacted, heavily by salt and had high salt concentrations in the water, and one that wasn't, and the size difference was pretty remarkable. And again, in an area, kind of north central Wisconsin, you've got a lot of anglers and a lot of people really into fishing. So it's another education piece for us that we can use with residents that if we want to keep the fish healthy and we want to enjoy those activities, we really have to do our part to minimize our impact to wildlife. And along with that, chloride salt is considered a permanent pollutant because it doesn't break down. The concentrations are going to be there. You can really only dilute it. Um, So other salt reduction efforts that we've done, as I've mentioned, pre-treat. I think pre-treat along with calibration are my, I guess if you could call them favorite things that we do. The pre-treat really cuts down on the amount of salt we need to use, and it really helps that salt stick to the road instead of the dry um, material going down that bounces all off the road, and then we're getting it in our ditches, or it's going direct into our storm drains. That pre-wetting really helps that salt activate, and when it hits the ground it's not bouncing all over the place. So we're really directing that material where it needs to go to do its job. Salt brine, again, got into it a little bit on this. It's a great tool. It it's one that I think is more political than it needs to be, but along with that and serving the public, we need to be mindful that there are some mixed feelings on salt brine. So it's our job that if we're going to use it, we need to be able to prove that it works, and I believe it does. And our drivers definitely notice a difference with it, but it's not one we're probably one of the last municipalities in the area to brine of the like the counties around us that use brine. We'll usually kind of keep an eye out on what they're doing, track the weather, and if we think that it's an event that brine would be appropriate, then we'll go out and do our brine route. We try to avoid salt brine if it's more of a rain snow mix, or it looks like we're going to get rain first, because we don't want to just have that material wash off before we get that nasty stuff. And we're still fine tuning it and seeing what works the best. Along with that, I know I'm sure other places are doing it too. We've been looking at, Jefferson County has really adopted a model, Jefferson County, Wisconsin, um, where I believe they are only doing liquid applications during storms right now. Um, that's something that we intended to try this year on a couple roads. um, it wasn't a good year to try something like that because we didn't really get the storms where we thought it would be appropriate. Most of the snow that we got here in March and early April was real heavy, and then we had some warm weather coming in after it. So the snow didn't stay around long. That we held off on really trying that application, but next year it's in our back pocket. We want to see, if we're scraping like our A routes and we're running our brine after it, if that's going to be sufficient enough to keep our roads safe. And it's a trial, but we need the right weather conditions to really give that a try. Another thing that the city has tried in the past was beet juice or Geomelt. That experiment we pulled back from. We did get quite a bit of complaints with that particular product just due on color. Um, it can turn pretty you know amount of snow, pretty ugly looking. Um, and some staining on some vehicles we got some complaints on. So we did pull back from that for now, but we're keeping our eyes out on other products. And of course our sand routes, going back to that graphic that we showed earlier in the presentation where maintaining 325 lane miles and only having 71 lane miles as designated salt routes. The rest of these routes are treated with a salt sand mix, which really helps cut back when a majority, or a lot of miles of road that we're running is just that sand with a little bit of salt in it, which is helpful. Keeps our sweepers busy. Future efforts. Um, as I mentioned in the last slide, one thing that we are looking at or we want to try is some liquid only routes. And that's going to be an effort for next year. We're going to try. Also, with the year that we had and looking at not ordering salt at all this year. That's a huge budget savings that we have. But in place, we really want to double down on looking at what some of our other liquids that we're interested in. Um, there's a couple counties now using cheese brine. We happen to have cheese factories. It's Wisconsin. I'd say, if you're from Wisconsin here, chances are you live somewhat close to a cheese factory where you could probably make some kind of deal. For us, it's learning, what kind of further treatment we might have to do with a cheese brine. And yes, beer brine is one we're really excited about looking into. And we have we've talked to a couple of places that have tried it already, and for us, it's figuring out if we have the capability. Some of the beer brine or like our source with a brewery here would be some pretty potent stuff that we need to see if it's something that we could cut with water or there's an easier way to kind of dilute it to what we need to still have the right concentration where it even makes sense to put on the road. As well as we have our eye on some other commercially produced products. You know, we looked a little bit at calcium or magnesium. Both have some benefits and drawbacks. I think the calcium would be fine if we're have the ability to just mix up in little batches, so it's only used in one storm, but can't really sit in suspension. So definitely maybe not perfect for our application, but there's some of you out there where that might work. And there's other brand name type um, um, applications or liquids. Um, and one thing that we'd like to focus on is we have our salt brine and it's great. When we do get those cold temperatures, looking at some kind of additive or one of these liquids that would be able to help us fight ice or adverse conditions in that cold weather in under 5 degrees. So it's always on our radar. What direction we're going to go for next year? Not 100% sure, but we will be introducing some other products for next year. Um, playing politics, I brought it up a little bit, and it is kind of funny when we mention that you know we're reducing something that's known to have a negative aspect on the or negative impact on the environment, and we're saving money. Um, it feels like it should be a win-win, but again, we get into what I call the kind of service debate, and it's what level of service residents are expecting, what level of service, alders are expecting. And we do need to find, somewhere in between, but pointing out the benefits, are outweighing, a side street that sees 10 cars a day, not being bare. Those are some of the tools or some of the talking points to, um, I guess, go after or bring up. Um, and one thing I should mention in this whole process, we have a lot of fun with it, and it's fun when we can talk about, what if we can use beer brine? How cool would that be for our city? Like that would people would find that fun. It helps with the attitudes and our operators. I think our operators are very mindful of it, and I think it's kind of a competition of I came back and look how much salt I still have on my truck because I followed what I was supposed to do. We do get a lot of that, and we get people. It helps our operators engage, and when they have ideas, they can bring it to us, and um, if it's something that we think can help the city out or help us with our salt reduction efforts, having your team on board really helps. And some other outreach that we do. Last year, we brought in over 200 area fourth graders to a Public Works Week open house, and that um, part of that field trip for them was we did a presentation on salt use and what it does to the environment. And Allison was there, and she got to show the kids, what's happening to the fish, how much, um, how a little bit of salt can forever pollute a uh 5 gallon bucket of water. So it was hands on, and if we can reach kids at that age, and not just on salt use but on public works and what we do, and how we play a role in the community, um, it hopefully, I say, you know creates easier future residents, ones that maybe have a better understanding of what we do and why we do it. So we don't get into some of the maintenance debates or level of service debates. That there's a little bit more informed citizens. Um, and another event we did that, it's not just for kids. In 2022, Allison came up to our shop, and we invited a lot of local municipalities out to kind of see what we're doing with our salt reduction. And I thought that open house went incredibly well. And in fact, it actually created, we kind of created our own group with some of the local municipalities that, we will try to meet. I think we're trying to do it quarterly, where it's not just salt topics. It's talking about, kind of some of the general issues we face, and possible solutions. So, Saltwise has been a great way for us to build some of that networking skills, or network. And as well as put a shout out for APWA, which I think just has tremendous resources on all of these efforts, and it's made up of municipalities that faced issues and found a solution, and sharing solutions is what it should really all be about. So I believe that is what I had for my slides here. So, if there's any questions.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Chris. No, that was great. So yes, as Chris said, if anyone has questions right now, you can type them into the chat or email me. Try to have my email up as well, wisaltwise@gmail.com. And I also type that into the chat. While waiting for a few questions, I've got a couple, Chris, for you.
Sure.
So I heard you say that you're not using beet juice anymore, but are you still using Geomelt at those colder temps?
We're not.
Okay.
We because the Geo Melt was a beet juice.
It had some beet juice in it. Yeah.
Yep, yep. And so that was. actually one of the products when we were getting complaints that, so we
Okay.
have stopped that. I the name of the product, there's a couple that we are looking at, and I can get those out. I don't have them off the top of my head, but
No, that's all right.
there was one that was an organic based. I don't know. I think it was from vodka is how I was reading through it. Um, and that's one that we're probably most interested in because we can just mix that in bulk with our brine. So I think it's 20% that product to 80% just
Mm,
your salt brine. And it's says it stays in suspension and it looks promising.
mhm,
And that can lower, I think, -10 effectiveness. So
mm,
um, yeah, that's probably a direction that we're gonna go for next year. But we've heard different reviews on like beet heat, which is
mhm,
supposed to take some of the negative complaints that beet juice was getting or Geomelt was getting. I've heard mixed reviews, some where they're saying it's still gumming up the system, where
mhm,
others are saying it's really not that big of a deal. But we have kind of a couple of people that want to try it and a couple of people that want to try this other product. I think ultimately with the savings of salt, we're probably just going to say let's try both for different applications
mhm,
and see how it works. As well as we're trying to get that kind of beer brine effort going again. It was something
yeah,
that
because I
we were
know,
pretty excited about. But again, it's going to take, we need the right resources of someone
mhm,
that can really tell us what it is we have, so that way
mhm,
we can use it correctly. And I don't know what kind of issues we could have, and I know what we get put to our waste treatment plant can be pretty potent. And if we had some odor complaints, I think
mhm.
we'd get that with that as well. So
Yeah.
um, working through the logistics of it.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I'm happy to kind of share a little bit more. I'm actually going to be doing an open house with Greene County this fall because they are using cheese brine. I know not as cool as the beer brine, but they've got a local creamery in Judah, Wisconsin. So it's just like down the road from Monroe, where the highway
Right.
department is sited. And yeah, they've been getting that for a number of years. And the cheese brine company, or well, creamery, I think it's Grande Cheese. They're actually bringing the salinity up to the 23.3% that the highway department needs. So it's just making it really easy for
Yeah,
them,
that's nice.
right? Yeah. So I think that's,
So with their before they're doing that, is with their current product, are they just adding some salt to get the salinity where they're looking
yeah.
for?
Yeah. So I don't know what it's at like as base to then get up to the 23.3%. And I also know that they are doing some extra filtration. So according to the DNR, it's like ultra filtration. So what is that exactly? I don't
Yeah,
know.
it's pretty
Yeah,
interesting.
because I think the concern is, and because I'm such like salt, 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 like kind of got my blinders on. It's like, oh, there's salt here, like let's divert that and use that where we need salt. But the DNR folks I was talking to were like, yes, Allison, and like there are all these other things in that cheese brine as well, right? So right now, when they're land applying it, they see that, if there's any phosphorus or other like micronutrients, like those are taken up, right, by crops. There is some chloride that could be used by crops, but it's like the sodium is really not good for the soil, and most of the chloride I think would be moving on through. So in my mind, I still see that we should do like that extra work to pull that salt out, but needing to do it so responsibly, right? So we're not adding something to
Yeah.
the roadway
Well,
that's
and I gotta imagine that filtration is probably helpful for your equipment as well. If
Mhm.
you
Yeah, so
have
it's
some
not,
impurities or,
yeah.
uh, that's one thing maintaining, the brine equipment, even though we're not using metal, most of it's plastic, but really those fittings need to be checked all the time because,
Hmm.
it's just straight up corrosive material.
Yeah.
So, especially in our brine making system, we do quite a bit of replacement, of fittings and some pipes. Even though they're plastic and that they're designed for what it's doing, it's just all you're doing is handling corrosive material.
Yeah.
You're gonna have some issues with it, but so there's some maintenance involved with it. So
Mm-hmm. And then one other clarification question.
yeah,
You mentioned that you've got those cheat sheets in the cabin. I actually have a photo of that and I use that
yeah.
at almost all my events. I'm so proud of you guys. Always giving you a shout out. So I think you mentioned though today that the drivers don't actually adjust that
Uh,
number of
yeah,
pounds per lane mile, right? So it's just based on, it's like the pavement temperature
yeah.
sensor in the
So
cab.
in the truck, yeah, that's a good clarification question. Our policy doesn't let the drivers go outside of that unless we tell them, but they can override the controls, but the system will set it to it based off of
Okay,
road.
based
So
on that road temp. Okay, got it. And then of course you said the blast and also the spinner speed to, yeah, direct the salt a little bit more as needed. So, okay, so yeah, those were kind of my questions. I don't see any other questions coming in right now, so we'll give people another minute here. I did put the links to the things you mentioned, the rainbow trout study. Jefferson County did a webinar with us, so I put that in the chat. And also you had mentioned that, it seems like on your end, like Brian does his job well, but you weren't, you don't have like the proof of it. And we do have some proof from the UW TOPS lab. So,
yeah, and
we
I
are
guess
maintenance server.
clarification, no, we believe it works. It's when to use it is really what
Okay.
our um there's times where we're tracking the weather and we'll go out and brine and either nothing happens or it's just a
Okay.
rain.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we try to be kind of the last to do it because we're trying to look at different things and we don't want to just brine to brine and
Hmm.
put down a salt solution if we don't have to.
Yeah.
Um, but no, we get positive feedback from our drivers on it, especially the ones that are going to be running the brown route for scraping,
Hmm.
where the material is just you're not getting that heavy pack on the road. It's not adhering to the road. So no, we're definitely believe in brine. It's I think brine has the most um, political
Hmm.
impacts. So we try to be mindful of that. So that's when we talk about brine, kind of
Gotcha.
what it is and how we try to be very careful on when we're going to brine.
Hmm. Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. So someone just said, very informative presentation. Thank you.
Thank
Um,
you.
thank you, Karen. Yeah, a couple things about that struggle to kind of get the word out about what brine is, what it does, what it isn't, what it's doing. The Clear Roads Consortium, which is like a whole bunch of DOTs that do research together to look at, everything kind of winter maintenance. They are developing some PSAs that
Okay.
should be out this fall. And I am pushing the DOT to kind of take that up and either be using those or kind of develop their own PSAs this winter because I mean, you're obviously not alone, right? It's
Right.
a lot of
Yep.
municipalities, counties that are using brine that are getting that pushback. And I think it comes from a lack of kind of education, understanding about brine.
And
So,
yep. And I think from our standpoint, the last year, we started a newsletter. I think we definitely need to improve our reach of our newsletter
mhm.
because we're not sending them out just to it's an electronic newsletter.
Gotcha.
And we joined the rest of the world and got a Facebook page just recently. So I think we're trying to expand our reach so we can get a lot of these educational materials out, or at least have that communication where if someone's seeing something we're putting out,
Mhm.
we'll welcome them to our shop, show them our show them what we do and why we're doing it. And I believe all of that would help on
Mhm.
some of the feedback that we can receive sometimes.
Yeah. Well, cool. Well, I really appreciate your time, Chris. And yeah, this was informative, obviously, for me too, as it always is. And I just love, yeah, your mindset of, we're doing great things. well, you didn't say great things. I'm going to say you're doing great things.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Um, but still thinking about, okay, what's next and how can we continue to take this and improve? And like you said, that focus on communication out from, kids all the way, newsletters, Facebook. It really is a part of, I feel like, public works that a lot of times people doing public works aren't in that job because they love to be on TV, right? Or the radio or
Yeah.
so thank you for being someone willing to kind of come out and share the awesome stuff that's happening. And yeah, I'm glad to know
Well,
you and know
thank
what
you for all your work too, Allison. You've done quite a bit, and I think due to your efforts, there's a lot more conversations about this than at least I've ever um, noticed before. So yeah, thank you for all your work, and I think we'll keep reaching people. So
sounds great. Well, tell Luke and the crew hi, and I'll
we'll do.
see you next time. All right.